for a lot of us, we don't like to admit that we're scared when we are. It's just something about life that we have that one person we always know. If you go by a haunted house, they're the ones that are going to act like nothing's bothering them. Or if they go to a scary movie and they jump, they won't admit that they were actually scared. They'll make some excuse like someone tickled them or they had to sneeze or whatever it is, but they won't admit that life is scary, even in that one moment. And yet there are all these fears that are common to human beings. Maybe you have some of these. And I really wish I could see your reactions when we go through these to be able to tell which one of these belongs to you. So there's arachnophobia, which we know the fear of spiders. There's ophidiophobia, which is a fear of snakes, which I'm familiar with. There's acrophobia, fear of heights, also been known to experience that one. Cynophobia, fear of dogs, which I don't get at all. Astrophobia, fear of thunder. And then there's like social phobias, like fear of social interactions, like you're the person that if you have a chance to mobile order instead of going to the counter, you're definitely doing that. Fear of public speaking. There's agoraphobia, fear of open spaces because you're worried there's no good place to escape to and you feel exposed. Or misophobia, which is fear of germs and dirt and all of that. But there's other common fears too besides those things that we can joke about and laugh about a little bit. Most of the time, these fears on this list, we rename. We don't call them fears. We don't call them phobias. These are our worries. These are our anxiety triggers. These are things that we are concerned about, not things we're scared about, right? So according to a article by Jennifer Delgado, these are the top ones for human beings today. There's the fear of failing, where if you envision every possible failure, if every step, every next thing you do, you're convinced that it's going to not go well and it's going to fail, this is something that you are scared of. You're fearful of not getting it right. And so maybe even you won't do something because you know it's going to be wrong. There's the fear of something bad is just about to happen. There's these unpredictable circumstances, right? And you just know like the shoe is about to drop. There's the fear of forgetting something important. There's the fear of not being able to control the future. So the uncertainty of what's coming next just increases your anxiety because you can't plan for what you don't know. There's the fear of your loved one being upset with you and the fear of something happening that is bad to the person that you love. And what happens with both of these most of the time is that you who are fearful bear the responsibility on your shoulders. If they're upset, it's your fault. What in the world can you do about it? If something bad happens to them, why can't you help? What is it that you can do to make their life better? And you bear this on yourself and you feel the pressure of it. For others, it's the fear of social judgment. Like you wonder when people are laughing, are they laughing at you or with you? The fear of being trapped. Whether it's on an elevator or in public transportation, the loss of control is an issue for you. There's the fear of getting sick, the fear of running out of time. Like you'll never be able to complete the things that you're supposed to. And there's even the fear of being anxious. In other words, you're anxious about the fact that you're going to be anxious. The prospect of responding with anxiety to a situation that's coming that you can't control creates even more anxiety just welling up within you. And so let's just admit it. Life can be scary. And there's a theme that runs through most of these things we're scared of, whether it's the most common things like spiders and heights and thunder, or it's things like speaking in public and being stuck and being judged. All of these things that we're fearful about usually are things that take away our sense of control. Like, what do I do when I can't do anything about it? For most of us, we end up with these coping mechanisms to try and deal with the fact that the things that I need to do, the things that I need to feel, the things that I've got to get through, so I have a sense of security, a sense of stability, a sense of control, and I don't feel that, I've got to do something to help me feel that again. Whether it really gives me control or not is not the issue. I just have to feel like I've got control. So I grew up in a time when we had one real TV in our house and there was no remote. And so you only had a few channels and you had to get up and go and change the channel. And you had 5 people in the house that had to agree on what was being watched. So this was an awkward situation. And then one day we got cable. And there was no greater joy than suddenly realizing that we had a remote control. And we didn't have to get up because I could sit there in my seat and I have total power over what was on the TV, especially when nobody else was there to watch, and I could pick anything I wanted, and ultimately that meant the Disney Channel was going to be on our TV. And sure, my parents were aware of what I was watching. They were probably by the stairs seeing what I was going to do, but I felt that with that remote and nobody else around, I had total control of the situation. It didn't matter if I really did or not, I just felt that, and it made me feel good. And we try and find that kind of stability, that kind of feeling in other areas of our lives too. So some of us, we search for it through our career advancement, through our money we have in the bank, and if I just have this certain amount, if I just have this toy, if I just have this promotion, then things will be good. And I have to work and I control the circumstances of my life in order to have that sense of stability. For others of us, we try and do this in a much harder place. We try to do it in the relationships we have with our children, with our parents, with our spouse, with our friends, and we think if I can just get them to do certain things, to feel certain ways about me, to act around me in a certain demeanor, then I'll have a sense of control. Like if they'll just date who I want them to, right? Some of us, we've done this with our accolades, whether it's grades or top sales or whatever it is. We do these things that we feel like we have control over in order to feel successful, to feel stability. We'll even have it with the use of our free time. For some of us, we just don't want anyone else to tell us what to do. And if I can get to a place where I can do what I want to do on my timetable, then I'm happy. I feel like I have control, autonomy of my life. But no matter how hard you work in these kinds of areas, no matter what your coping mechanisms seem to be, there's going to be something that comes up in your life that you cannot control. We just lived through a pandemic shutdown just a couple of years ago, right? Some of you have experienced the diagnosis that you didn't plan for, or like me, have been driven off of the road by careless drivers, or you've encountered that somebody else's feelings was something you couldn't do anything about. And when we're in these places, it's okay to admit that life is scary. And if we're really honest, we're not looking for what we think is a whole lot most of the time. Most of us are just wanting to have a blessing in the places where we feel scary. We want to have a blessing that says we're going to be okay, that there's some peace in this place, that we have a way forward. We just want something to get us through to the other side. In Genesis, we read about this man named Jacob. He is the example for me of the type of person who is trying to handle the scary things in their life their own way. They are finely tuned coping mechanisms that sometimes have seemed to have worked, and so they just keep getting used over and over and over again in Jacob's life. And his whole life, he has been living up to his name by the way he's coped with the scary things. His name means to be a deceiver, and deception has ruled what he's done. Whether it's through keeping secrets, whether it's through manipulating, whether it's through trying to trick people, this is how he got control of his life. This is how he claimed the blessings in his life that he felt like he deserved. Because either God or other people were taking too long, and so he felt impatient because what happens if he missed out on it, or because he just pridefully really thought, hey, this should be mine anyway, So what can I do to make sure that I get a hold of it? And through his own manipulations and deceptions, he got some things, like the birthright and blessing that were supposed to belong to his brother. And we find him in chapter 32 getting ready to return home for the first time in decades. He had left all those years ago with just a staff in his hand. And now he was returning with enough family and enough children, enough goods and livestock to make 2 camps. But the reason he'd been gone for so long was because that birthright and that blessing he was holding on to that he'd made sure he got, well, his getting them and the way he got them broke his family apart. And he had to run because his brother had threatened and probably could have and would have killed him. And now as he returns home these decades later, he's facing something he can't control. There's no way to deceive or manipulate his way out of this in his mind, really. Because the brother that he wronged, Esau, is coming to meet him on the way home. And he's bringing 400 militiamen with him. And the question that he can't answer is, how is Esau's mood? Does he still want to kill me? Is he happy to see me? Is he going to just take a tax from me? Is he going to take it out and take revenge on my family and leave me? And he's filled with great fear and distress because he's facing something where his sense of control and stability is gone. He was at a point where he just wanted to be reunited with his brother. He just wanted to have the blessing of seeing his face and maybe not dying and losing it all in the process. And so in order to try and get that blessing, he does what he knows. He schemes his way to try and get it to happen. He sends gifts, step 1, out in front of him. Step 2, he divides everybody else into these groups, and he sends them out in different places. He figures if Esau finds one and wipes it out, well, at least I'll still have the other one. And the last step in his scheme is he's going to be alone at the back of the line. Everything else, everyone else is going in front, and he's going to be taking up the rear. And while he had this scheme that he hoped would work, gifts to soften him up, people to kind of be bait or to satisfy him if he doesn't like the gifts, and then him last so he can turn and run or move forward as needed. All of that scheming, all of that deception still couldn't get rid of the fear and the distress he was feeling. Because that sense of control in the face of what he was going up against, well, it was just beyond his abilities to do anything about. And he'd come to the end of his way of living when things were scary. And so Jacob tries to face the fear and seek the blessing a different way in the midst of his worry and anxiety. He's trying to switch and do it the way that the God that he has known about and traveled with for these last many years would call him to do it. And so in the middle of the night, somewhere between 9 and 3, which is honestly the time when our anxiety and worry is the highest, Jacob does something smart. He's off by himself, and he decides he's going to pray to this God who has brought him this far. And he prays, "O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, 'Go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper.' I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become 2 groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted." Our way of controlling usually comes from impatience, insecurity, and pride. And here comes Jacob, who had lived that way for a long time. And he comes with humility. I am unworthy of all of the kindness and the faithfulness you have shown me, God. Our ways typically depend on control and using our own strengths and our own resources to deal with the threats and the scariness in front of us. But here he knows that God is not interested in my own strengths or weaknesses, but in his power. He is the one who can do something about what I can do nothing about. And so he cries out to him, save me. I have come to rely on you. And so God's way of dealing with the fearfulness in life requires humility. It requires giving up control. But there's another piece besides humbleness and dependence that Jacob needed to get through this. So it says, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives and his 2 maidservants and his 11 sons and crossed the ford of the Jabbok River. After that he sent them across the stream, and he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Please, Jacob said, tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? And then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. I wrestled in high school. I understand how taxing it is. Like 6 minutes can feel like forever. To think about wrestling someone through the night is crazy, because you're going to reach a point when you are physically spent. You are exhausted. All of the adrenaline has rushed out of your body, and all that's left is pure persistence. Jacob would not give up on holding on to this one he was wrestling, holding on to God himself until the blessing came. God could have crushed Jacob. It really wasn't a fair match when you think about who was wrestling him. But something is happening in the struggle that God wants to have happen. And he could have given up too soon, and Jacob would have missed out on it. But instead, he keeps holding on to him desperately, because he knows, because he has humbled himself and he is dependent on God, that he cannot get the blessing he needs on his own. He has to get it from the one he is struggling with right now. Struggling with him in a way that he didn't think he would ever have to be there. Struggling with him in a place where he doesn't understand the circumstances he's in. He doesn't understand why he has to go through this. Struggling with him, wondering if there's a way to get past what he needs to get past. And so he's holding on to this one, and he will not let go of him until he blesses him, because he is the one he knows who keeps his promises. He knows he's the one who blesses him in the midst of uncertainty. He's the one he knows is with him and sees him even when suffering is happening. And so he has to get the blessing from him. It's coming from nowhere else. And so God, in the midst of the struggle, forces Jacob to speak his name. He's not here trying to get him to say who he is. He knows. But to speak his name in this culture is to own it, because your name revealed your character. He's looking for an act of confession from him. For Jacob to be able to say, this is who I am. I am the one who deceives and manipulates. I am the one who tries to control things from the shadows. And as he confesses it, as he owns this, he keeps holding on to God. The confession of his lack of character, his lack of integrity, does not separate him from God, but it draws him even closer in as he holds on to him. The truth in his perseverance, not his usual tricks, are what leads him to the blessing that God has for him. And the blessing that God has isn't what we sometimes think of as blessing. It's not full bank accounts. It's not an easy life. It's not more comfort. It's not his wishes being granted as if he was the genie. The blessing that God offers him is transformation. That through struggling with God in this way and refusing to let go of him, God is able to transform Jacob into something new. It's like the whole time he's been chiseling away at all of the things that do not fit the masterpiece that God is creating Jacob to be. He's chiseling away his pride. He's chiseling away his deception of others. He's chiseling away his self-deception until all that's left is the new life, the new character that this guy can carry with him forward. And so to represent that, he gives him a new name, Israel. Because this new name represents his new character. That this is someone who perseveres through the struggles and becomes an overcomer because they are persistent, because they are humble, and because they are dependent on the one who can do something about the things he could never control in the first place. God's way of humbly holding on, even in the struggle, is how he blesses us too. You see, we can hold on to the way we have done things before, leaving us fearful, leaving us without peace, leaving us with all those worries and anxieties and all the things that we're worried about and all the things we can't control. Or we can let go of those ways of doing life and persistently hold on to God until he blesses us, even in the midst of struggling with him. When we don't understand why, we still hold on. When we don't get what he's doing, we still hold on. So whatever your struggle is, God is chiseling a way to make you new, where you will not be defined by your struggle with the baggage and trauma of your past, or the struggle with your inner voice, or the beliefs that you have that fill your mind but are lies in light of Christ. You're no longer going to be defined by all of the broken relationships where you try to control other people. You're no longer defined by any of these things that God is chiseling away in you to make you his masterpiece. On the other side of the struggle, you and I are changed, just like Jacob. From fearful, deceptive, all of these things we don't want to be, into overcomers in the face of the things that are scaring us. Because we get to be defined by who God says we are, not who others say we are. And it is that definition and identity that he gives us. It is knowing that we have this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as our God that gives us peace in the face of all of the scary things in life. I mean, just look what happens with Jacob. He still has to go face Esau. But see, Jacob's done now. There's Israel. And so Israel has a new plan. Instead of trying all this deception, instead of trying all these other things, he reverses the order. Women and children, you're behind me. I'm going to meet him first. And as he walked, God worked on the hearts of Esau, which made that meeting that they had one of joyful tears in the midst of all that had gone on before it. What did God work out for you if you're willing to hold him through the struggle? Could it be that there is something that you could let go of trying to control, that you might desperately cling to him, knowing that you aren't worthy of it, but that doesn't matter because he loves you, knowing that you aren't strong enough, and that doesn't matter because he is the one with the power, knowing that you can't control it. But he can make you new in the midst of what you're struggling with. Heavenly Father, I pray that as we look at our lives, we don't just see the things that scare us or the ways that we've broken down, but we see the ways that you are chiseling away all of the things that are keeping us from being your masterpiece. Help us to cling on to you no matter what seems to be shaking around us. Help us to know that you will help us come to the other side with a new identity and a new character and a new purpose and a new way of living that is so much greater than the one we had before, because it is one that is grounded in you and your power and your presence instead of the little stuff that I can bring myself. Help me to humble myself enough and trust you enough to let you be the one in control. For you have proven over and over again not only your loving kindness, but your faithfulness, your power, and your ability to work out things for good for those who love you and are called according to your purpose. Make this real in our lives today, we pray. Amen.